The wind swept across the dusty plains of Arizona, carrying with it the scent of sagebrush and the faint cry of an eagle. In the heart of the territory, where land stretched as far as the eye could see, stood a weather-worn ranch owned by a man named Luke Carver. Luke was a cowboy through and through, broad-shouldered, sun-darkened, and hardened by years of solitude. His neighbors described him as tough, no-nonsense, and sometimes cold, but those who looked closer knew there was a hollowness in his eyes. He had lost too much, his parents to fever, his younger brother to war, and the woman he once loved to another man. He worked the land, herded cattle, mended fences, and came home to silence. And silence was the cruelest companion. One summer evening, when the small frontier town of Ash Hollow was buzzing with a mix of miners, settlers, and drifters, a group of men in the saloon cooked up a cruel joke. They laughed about Luke's loneliness, mocking his solitude. "A man like him needs a wife," one sneered, "but no decent woman would choose him." The laughter was harsh, biting, fueled by whiskey and bitterness. One of them proposed something heartless. "What if we send him a bride? Not a fine lady, not some settler girl, but an Apache girl. Poor and desperate, he wouldn't know what to do with her. It'd be a sight, wouldn't it?" The others roared with laughter. They called it entertainment. They found a young Apache woman, quiet and unassuming, working for scraps on the edge of town. Her name was Ayanna. Ayanna had lived through hardship. The daughter of a proud people, she had seen her tribe scattered, their lands taken, their dignity stripped away. Her father had died resisting, her mother from hunger. Alone, she survived by doing laundry for settlers, sewing garments for pennies, and gathering herbs in the wild. She was often met with suspicion, ridicule, and worse, mocked for her dark hair, her copper skin, her silence. So when men approached her with a promise of marriage, food, and shelter, she hesitated. She could feel the sneer behind their smiles, but hunger gnawed at her, and exhaustion weighed her shoulders. She agreed, not out of hope, but out of survival. And so they sent her to Luke Carver's ranch, laughing behind her back, expecting humiliation to follow. The first time Luke saw her, he froze. She stood at the edge of his porch, her dress patched and faded, her bare feet dust-stained. Her eyes, though weary, carried a quiet strength, like rivers that had cut through mountains. In her hands, she clutched a small bundle of belongings, a shawl, a carved wooden comb, and a pouch of herbs. "Who sent you?" Luke asked, his voice sharp. She lowered her gaze. "They said, you needed a wife." For a long moment, the only sound was the creaking of the porch boards under Luke's boots. Then he exhaled, low and bitter, realizing what this was. A joke, a cruel one. He could almost hear the men at the saloon laughing. They thought this'd be funny, Luke muttered, half to himself. He studied her, this fragile yet unbroken woman standing before him, a victim of mockery. Something in him bristled, not at her, but at them. He could have sent her away. He could have told her to go back, to endure the jeers and whispers. But Luke Carver, though hardened, was not cruel. And he knew too well the sting of being treated as less than human. "You're not a joke," he said finally, his voice steady. "Not to me. Ayanna stayed that night. Luke gave her his bed while he slept on the floor by the fire. She watched him quietly, puzzled by the rough man's unexpected gentleness. He didn't touch her, didn't demand anything of her. He cooked beans and cornbread, setting her plate first. It was the first warm meal she'd had in days. The following morning, Ayanna offered to leave. But Luke shook his head. "Not until you've got somewhere better to go. Till then, you stay here. This house is big enough for two." Days turned to weeks. She mended his torn shirts with delicate stitches. She gathered wild herbs and brewed teas for his aching back. She moved through his home with quiet dignity, sweeping floors, humming soft songs in her native tongue, filling the silence with something almost like peace. And Luke, he found himself listening. At first, it was her voice, gentle, melodic, like a river over stones. Then it was her presence, steady, uncomplaining, resilient. She spoke little, but when she did, her words carried weight. She spoke of the stars, of the old stories her father told around the fire. She spoke of the strength of women who carried generations in their hands. Something inside Luke shifted. He began to rise earlier, just to see her hair catch the morning sun. He worked harder, wanting to bring in more so she wouldn't want for food. When he caught townsfolk whispering about her, he straightened his back and looked them dead in the eye, daring them to speak further. But life was not so kind. One evening, when Luke and Ayanna came into town for supplies, the same men who had orchestrated the cruel joke cornered them outside the general store. Well, one of them sneered. "Looks like the cowboy took the bait. How's your little squaw, Carver? Keepin' your bed warm?" The words burned like acid. Ayanna flinched, shame flashing across her face. Luke's jaw tightened. "Say that again," Luke said, his voice low, dangerous. The man smirked. "What, you gonna fight for her? She ain't worth. Luke's fist connected before the insult finished. The man crumpled to the ground. The others backed away, startled by the fury in Luke's eyes. He stood tall, his voice ringing out so the whole street could hear. She's worth more than the lot of you put together. And she's with me now. Any man who disrespects her, disrespects me. For the first time in years, Ayana's eyes filled with tears, not of sorrow, but of something unfamiliar. Belonging. That night, under the vast blanket of stars, Luke spoke quietly by the fire. They sent you here to shame me. To shame you. But I won't let 'em have that victory. Not now, not ever. If you'll have me, Ayana, stay. Not as someone left on my porch. Not as someone's cruel joke. But as my wife. Ayana looked at him, the firelight dancing in her dark eyes. For so long she had been nobody in the eyes of the world, discarded, forgotten, mocked. But here was a man, scarred yet steady, offering her more than food and shelter. Offering her dignity. Her voice trembled, but her words were clear. Yes. The wedding was small, just the pastor, a witness or two, and a wide open sky. She wore a dress sewn from simple calico, and he wore his cleanest shirt. When Luke placed his hat over his heart and vowed himself to her, there was no laughter, no jeering crowd, only sincerity. And when she spoke her vows, her voice steady despite the tears, Luke felt something he thought he'd lost forever, hope. From that day forward, she was no longer Ayana, the poor Apache girl mocked by townsfolk. She was Ayana Carver, respected wife, equal partner, cherished heart of the ranch. The whispers in town never fully disappeared, but they faded against the undeniable truth. Together, Luke and Ayana thrived. Their ranch flourished. Their laughter filled the once empty house. And every time Luke introduced her as his wife, she held her head high, knowing she was no one's shame, no one's joke. Years later, when people spoke of Luke Carver, they didn't just speak of the cowboy. They spoke of the woman beside him, the one who brought songs back into his home, who healed his brokenness with quiet strength. And when children asked how their story began, Luke would smile, take Ayana's hand, and say, they tried to make her a joke. Instead, she became my forever. Because kindness, when chosen in defiance of cruelty, has the power to transform everything. And love has the last laugh. The Arizona sky stretched endlessly, painted with streaks of orange and purple as the sun began to sink behind the mesas. The air was dry, humming with the distant buzz of cicadas, and the land lay open and raw, rugged as the men who worked it. Luke Carver stood outside his ranch house, leaning against a weather-worn post. His ranch was modest but sturdy, a corral, a small barn, and acres of hard-won grazing land. From a distance, he looked unshakable, a broad-shouldered cowboy hardened by years under the desert sun. But up close, one could see it in his eyes, a hollowness, a loneliness carved deep into him by loss. Luke had buried too many dreams. His parents had been taken by fever when he was young, leaving him and his brother to scrape survival from the land. His brother fell in the war, and the woman he once loved had left with another man. Now Luke had only the cattle, the soil, and a silence. In the nearby town of Ash Hollow, Luke was a subject of whispers. Folks respected his grit but pitied his solitude. And one summer evening, a group of men in the saloon, half-drunk and cruel, turned that pity into mockery. Carver's got himself a fine ranch, one man slurred, but what good's a spread like that with no wife to fill the house? He'll die with only the coyotes to mourn him. The others chuckled. Another added with a sneer, a man like him don't deserve a lady. Too cold, too mean. Maybe what he needs is a surprise, something to shake him. That sparked an idea. A wicked one. They laughed about sending him a bride, not a settler woman but a poor Apache girl. Let's see how the proud cowboy handles that, one of them jeered. It'll be a show. And so they found her. Her name was Ayana. She was young but weathered by hardship, her black hair falling in unkempt strands, her dress patched thin. She lived on the fringes of town, surviving by washing clothes, sewing garments, and gathering herbs. Her people had been scattered, their land stolen, their voices drowned by prejudice and power. She had no family left, no safety, no promise of tomorrow. When the men approached her, they spoke of food, shelter, and marriage to a rancher. She hesitated. She could sense their mockery, but hunger gnawed at her belly, and she had endured enough nights under a cold sky. Survival pressed harder than pride. So she agreed, clutching a small bundle of her belongings, a carved comb, a worn shawl, and a pouch of herbs. The men laughed all the way back to the saloon. To them, she was a pawn in a cruel jest. To her, it was a lifeline. And that's how, one hot afternoon, Ayana arrived at Luke Carver's ranch. Luke was mending a broken fence when he noticed her. A slim figure at the edge of his porch, dusty from travel, barefoot, clutching a bundle to her chest. Her eyes met his, dark, weary, but steady, like water that had cut through stone. He wiped his brow, confusion furrowing his face. "Who are you?" Her voice was quiet, halting. They said you needed a wife." The words landed like stones. Luke froze, then slowly understood. A joke, a cruel one. He could almost hear the laughter of the men who had sent her. He studied her again. She wasn't some schemer. She wasn't part of their game. She was its victim. His jaw tightened. "They thought this'd be funny," he muttered bitterly. Ayanna lowered her eyes, bracing for rejection. She had known. It would come. She was used to being cast aside. But instead, Luke spoke words she did not expect. His voice softened, low but steady. "You're not a joke. Not to me." And with that single choice, words spoken in defiance of cruelty, the course of both their lives shifted. That night, Luke gave her his bed and slept on the floor by the fire. He cooked beans and cornbread, placing her plate first. She ate quietly, hardly believing his kindness. In the morning, she offered to leave. She didn't want to be a burden, didn't want to risk more humiliation. But Luke shook his head. "Not until you've got somewhere better to go. This place is big enough for two. Stay as long as you need." For the first time in months, perhaps years, Ayanna felt a glimmer of something she thought she had lost forever. Safety. And for Luke, the silence of his home was broken, replaced by the quiet rustle of her movements, the soft hum of her songs, and the strange, unexpected warmth of not being alone.